Thank you so much for joining us again with Longwood Symphony. I am very pleased to be joined by one of our wonderful bass players, Sam Wattrus. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
So Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a graduate student at Harvard right now, and I've been playing in the Longwood Symphony for the last couple years. This is my fourth year. And I study biology. I actually work with one of our other members, Len Zahn, one of our trumpet players. I work in his lab at Children's Hospital, and we use the zebrafish as a model to study stem cell biology and early blood development. So normally I spend most of my time in the lab looking through microscopes at fish, raising different transgenic lines, trying to, find interesting new things about blood stem cells. But lately I haven't been able to go in because of COVID-19.
So are you able to do any of the work that you had originally planned on doing during this time?
That I had originally planned on doing, definitely not. But I have done, everyone's transitioned in some form to doing remote work. So fortunately, a lot of the stuff that I do depends on, high quality imaging. So we do a lot of microscopy and take a lot of sort of time-lapse movies of early embryonic development. And it just so happens that it's a lot easier to take a lot of movies than it is to analyze a lot of movies. So we've had a lot of stuff sort of like as a backlog of data that we can analyze. And we've been able to use some sort of remote access things to get at some of our files that are, located on like the server in the lab, and we can still access some of our software that we need to process those files. So we've been able to do some productive things on sort of data acquisition and data analysis, luckily. But all experimental work has totally stopped for my stuff.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it makes sense. I've had the pleasure of hearing Len talk a little bit about the zebrafish research, but for someone like me who knows absolutely nothing in the medical or scientific world, can you explain a little bit what that research is about?
Sure. So I guess the most important thing is that we are not zebrafish biologists. We just use zebrafish because we're interested in development. So, people work with lots of different sort of model systems of choice. So a lot of people, work with cell cultures or mice in the lab, for instance. And all of this is sort of just as an end to try and understand the things that happen normally in biology. And we've chosen to use the zebrafish because it offers us several advantages. So the main ones being for us that we can get tons and tons of embryos that are outside of the mother's body. So with zebrafish, they lay, hundreds to thousands of embryos. And not only do they lay them outside the body, but they're also transparent. So it's super easy to like literally just take an embryo and look with a high-powered microscope, and you can watch cells divide and differentiate to give rise to structures that you're interested in. So there's a lot of advantages for us in using this system. So Len and I are really interested in blood development. So Len's background is as a hematologist, so it grew out of that. And I'm interested in the blood system because it is sort of the paradigm setting organ system for stem cell biology. The first stem cells were found in blood. And so it's one of the better understood systems and is a really useful way for us to understand stem cell biology as a whole, is to pick that one where we know a lot of things. And so we like to use the fish to look at the first few days of development, because in that time, they'll make the first blood stem cells that will support the animal for the rest of its life. And the processes that we see in the fish are very, very, very similar to the ones that happen in the human. So if you find a drug that treats a disease in the fish, there's a very good chance it'll work in the human as well.
Wow. Well, you certainly know how to explain it to someone who has no idea what's going on. So thank you. Now, remind me, are you getting your PhD at Harvard?
That's right. Yeah.
So how many years of school do you still have ahead of you?
That's a great question. So the end of the PhD is sort of nebulous because it, whenever the work is done is when the PhD is done. For me, I actually just finished my last curricular requirement this morning, actually. So there's, loosely defined set of classes you need to take to fulfill the PhD requirements. And those are really not the point of the program. Those are just sort of to give you a foundation. Finished most of those in the first few years, but things drag on. So now it's just, we need to finish this project and get the paper out. And we think that we could start sending this off in the next, 6 to 8 months. So hopefully next year sometime, thinking about graduating.
For all of us, I hope that it will happen soon, which will mean the best for everyone.
Yeah.
So Sam, you are a bass player. And for anyone who doesn't know, it is the largest string instrument. So you have to haul that thing all over Boston when you have to go to rehearsal.
Yeah, it's when I picked the bass back when I was, I don't know, in the 5th or 6th grade, it was, we always, my parents and I, it was always with the understanding that this was a temporary thing. We're not going to buy a bass, and there's such a hassle to move around. So you can play bass in school as long as they have basses available at the school for you to use. But once you get to high school, they need you to buy a bass then. So that's it. Then of course I got to high school and they were like, you don't need to buy a bass. We have them here to play through high school. And by the end of that, I was very excited about it and wanted to keep going. And I always thought, oh no, well, when I go to college, that's it. But ended up moving out to Boston and getting a bass in the end. So I haven't actually had to transport a bass long distance so much. I've always sort of like met them where they are and then ported them around town. But yeah, they're hilariously large, and that can be kind of an issue, especially if you don't own a car, which I don't.
So you've been playing since you were a kid, and what made you want to keep playing through college and through all of this, PhD and everything?
Yeah. Well, so I got very into music during high school. I became very passionate about it. And I ended up, I obviously played in my high school orchestra, but ended up joining my high school choir and started a band with some friends. And so I probably played music more in high school than I did like school things. And, I ultimately didn't end up pursuing a career in music because I ended up being more interested in sort of the sciences. But it has become such a part of my life and the way that I sort of perceive and interact with the world that it's not something I wanted to give up. And then when I came out for college, there was a really strong music program with like a culture of people who weren't necessarily studying music for their degree, still pursuing it, that like I could slot right into that community.
Like the people in Longwood Symphony.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said it changes the way you perceive the world, and can you explain that a little more? How does being a musician change maybe your perception of, for instance, the research that you're doing right now?
I certainly think that people who play music, especially people who play music in groups, will do some things differently. So actually, Len and I have talked about this a bit. When you're giving a talk, there's this sort of sense of timing and rhythm that obviously you don't need to be a musician to give a good talk, but you do get, I think, better at sort of these instinctual cues, and also sort of, reading a group of people that you are either presenting to or presenting with. So like back when I played in a band, for instance, there was a lot of nonverbal communication that would go on about sort of like, okay, we're going to, vamp this again, or like, okay, we're going to end it early. And so you get better at sort of your performance skills, which have a lot of roles both in like teaching and presenting. And then I think from the perspective of the research group, this is where I think that bass players in particular sometimes get more translatable skills, or maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think that people who play bass and keep playing bass are very interested in sort of supporting the whole, or supporting like the group, because it's very rare you get a bass solo, or like the bass is the concerto instrument, right? So in like a research group, there's like, everybody has their own projects, of course, but like we all work together. And so I think there's this sort of underlying understanding that like, it's someone's counting on me to be there and do this thing. So it might be sort of just comes along with the culture of like the instrument and the orchestra as a whole, but that definitely plays into it.
What are you doing right now? Because I'm assuming you're spending, 90% of your time at home.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing right now to have fun, to relax, to keep yourself sane?
Well, I've been getting outside as much as is responsible. So I have taken up a new sort of route for running around the block and around the river. Other than that, though, I mean, my fiance and I have been looking for new places to live, sort of just like looking ahead to when this is all over. We de-stress by watching movies or TV shows we haven't gotten around to yet, or playing enough Animal Crossing that we've sort of developed a whole civilization on our Nintendo Switch.
So how has music been playing a role when you can't rehearse and you can't get together to play music with people?
Well, I think that there's, you can obviously play on your own, which is therapeutic in its own right. And I think not getting together with other people and being able to make music with each other has had a lot of people just spending more time listening to and appreciating music in general. And so you've seen obviously these like viral videos of people singing from their balconies and trying to share music with each other. And so I think everyone right now is appreciating that kind of art more and more, and just spending time listening to like good music and trying to like enjoy something that is completely separate from what is happening in the world right now and sort of lets us think about other things and experience new things. So yeah, I think we've definitely been listening to all sorts of music here, like pop music and classical, just to sort of escape a little bit.
Is there anything else that you want to share with people? Any advice or suggestions on how to just keep chugging along, getting through this?
I think that the biggest thing that a lot of us have had to sort of reckon with and realize, especially people who are, like a lot of members of Long Litter people are, I'm not going to say we're workaholics, but people are very active and productive people most of the time. We've all had to sort of realize that you don't have to, come out of quarantine having done this amazing new product. You don't have to make a new genre of music. You don't have to have written King Lear. If you can just basically keep your sanity and keep yourself healthy during this time, that's totally good. But that's true. But for some people, that's not going to feel like enough. So at the same time, you don't need to sort of like do everything that you ever thought you were going to do when you had free time. But finding ways to sort of like be productive, that's going to be productive in a way that will keep you happy and sane and sort of mentally healthy. And it's going to be different for everybody. But I think in general, people have been saying, keeping a routine of some sort, even if it's not the same as it was during non-COVID times, and being realistic about the sorts of things that you can actually do during this time. So yeah, being thoughtful with your time and using it in a way that will be productive for you, which doesn't necessarily mean productive for your career or your job necessarily.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I talked to another musician, our flute player, Jenny Zuck, who said the same thing. You don't feel like you have to accomplish a whole long list of things. Right now, what we need to focus on is making sure that the community is healthy, and that's got to be our number one thing. And that might mean watching Netflix and playing Animal Crossing.
That's totally fine. And also, like, since we're home all the time, right, and we spend all of our time in the same place, you do need to draw some distinction between when you're doing work time and when you're not, even if you are, maybe you live in a one-room studio or something, and so you don't really like move physical spaces, but when the TV goes on, like, the workday is over, and it can be over then. You don't have to be working this whole time.
Yeah, that definitely home work shift is difficult for people who aren't used to working from home.
Yeah.
It's probably the hardest part for us workaholics, as you said. So, Sam, is there anything else that you want to add before I send you off?
I don't think so. People should just wash their hands and stay away from each other.
Yes, that's, you know, it's over and over what we're hearing, but it's important. We have to keep saying it. So Sam, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I also appreciate what you're doing for your research and everything that you're doing to support the community in that way, and of course what you do to play in the orchestra.
Thank you so much. It's been really nice to talk to you.